Let's talk about the Pokemon era that defined silver and gold. I genuinely think we're watching one of the biggest shifts in Pokemon history happen right before our eyes. For years, everyone focused on modern, alt arts, waifus, massive PSA 10 pops, and endless new cards. But one era has stood the test of time, the EX era. And honestly, I think so many collectors don't even realize how good this era actually was. Today, I want to do something special and walk through the entirety of my favorite era, the EX era. What made it different, why collectors are obsessed with it now, why gold stars became grails, and why I personally believe silver border EXs may still be fairly undervalued compared to where that market may be going. And trust me folks, once you really look at the rarity, the artwork, the populations, the nostalgia, it starts to make a lot of sense why these cards keep climbing. Let's start off at the beginning. What exactly is the EX era? The EX era ran from 2003 to 2007. It started with the classic Ruby and Sapphire and ended with an even bigger banger, Power Keepers. This was the period right after Wizards of the Coast had left the building, so Pokemon was kind of in a weird situation at this point. The hobby honestly wasn't nearly as popular as it is today. You didn't have massive breakers, you didn't have rip and ships, there were no influencers opening up $1 million boxes. You didn't have millions of people chasing after every new release. For this reason, a lot of these sets were printed in a lot smaller numbers than modern releases. That's a huge reason why these cards feel so scarce to us today. It went a long way. But the other thing that made the EX era feel so special was just purely the identity. This era had its own style. The silver borders, the aggressive artwork, the hollow patterns, the darker, edgier colors, the experimental card designs. These cards just looked different. Even today, when you walk up to someone at a card show who either has a showcase or a binder full of these EX era cards, it just feels different. You can tell that it's in a class of its own. Really quickly guys, if you like the content, please remember to like, comment, and subscribe. We are so close to 1,000 subscribers. It would mean the world if you guys could help me get there. I hope to see you guys there at 1,000. We will be doing something special when we cross that mark. So back to where it all started, Ruby and Sapphire. This is the moment we get the first silver border EX cards. Now, these weren't modern EX Pokemon cards. They weren't your ordinary EX Pokemon cards. These were the lowercase EX cards. And at the time that these things dropped, they felt insane. Any player of the game would know that these Pokemon had massive HP, huge attacks, unique artwork, and they instantly became chase cards for collectors and players alike. Then you move into sets like Sandstorm and Dragon. This is where the aesthetics and the artwork really start to become recognizable. Some of the things that you might start seeing: full art style poses, textured backgrounds, dynamic action shots, and the silver border with the hollow foil just looked incredible. It was a chef's kiss. I think what's also really important to understand is the pull rates. These cards were hard to pull. Modern collectors are used to getting a ton of hits in a booster box. Back then, you could open a ton of packs and get absolutely nothing. The scarcity mattered, and it matters even more now because you couldn't get a lot of these cards in a high grade. Moving into one of the most unique stretches in the entire era. Team Magma versus Team Aqua, Hidden Legends, and my absolute favorite set from the era of all time, all the nostalgia, Fire Red, Leaf Green. Team Magma versus Aqua gave us one of the coolest concepts Pokemon has ever delivered to us. Entire decks built around villain teams. The artwork was gritty, the cards had personality, and honestly, This set feels more appreciated now than when it originally released. Then Hidden Legends introduces more legendary cards. These continued to build the EX lineup, but Fire Red and Leaf Green. This is where the nostalgia begins. Now we are mining that EX era design with the original Kanto Pokemon that we all know and love. That combination is incredibly powerful in this hobby. Cards like Charizard EX, Blastoise EX, Venusaur EX, and my favorite card of all time, Gengar EX. A combination of nostalgia, scarcity, iconic Pokemon, difficult graders leads to one big explosion in price. That is essentially the perfect formula for long-term demand. Okay, let's get into what many collectors consider peak EX era. Introducing Team Rocket Returns and Deoxys. Team Rocket Returns. What else needs to be said? This set was ridiculous. Dark Pokemon, Rocket's Pokemon, beautiful reverse holofoils, and some of the most difficult cards to grade in the hobby. This is also where you really start to see the market start to separate those premium EX era cards from everything else. Condition sensitivity becomes brutal. Print lines, silvering, edge wear, centering, and don't get it confused. Silvering and centering are two very different things. PSA 10s on many of these cards are incredibly rare. And then comes EX Deoxys. These both gave us some of the biggest grails in the entire hobby. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Gold Stars. Now, if you are newer to Pokemon, it's really going to be hard to explain and describe fully how special these Gold Star cards really were. These weren't just rare cards. They felt mythical. Shiny Pokemon before shiny became overused. Pokemon breaking outside of the traditional artwork barriers. Extremely difficult pull rates. Honestly, these cards felt impossible to pull as a kid if you could even get your hands on the packs. And now they're some of the most respected cards in the hobby, with some collectors and investors kind of carving out them as a different part of the hobby with their own special marketplace. Okay, I think we need to give some time and more attention to Gold Stars because it was such a huge part of this era. Gold Stars became the crown jewel of the EX era. And honestly, I think they represent something really special in the Pokemon collecting space. This is a huge part because they appeal to both vintage collectors and modern collectors. Vintage collectors love the rarity and the scarcity. Modern collectors love the chase factor and the bold artwork. They kind of sit perfectly in between both worlds. Let's name some of the big boys. Rayquaza Gold Star, Charizard Gold Star, Umbreon Gold Star, Espeon Gold Star. And let's not forget some of those from Team Rocket Returns. Torchic, Mudkip, and Trico. These cards have become true grails. Not just expensive cards, not just hype cards, actual grails. One of the biggest reasons for this is the pop counts. What are we talking about pop? We're talking, of course, about PSA population. Some of these cards have shockingly low PSA 10 populations compared to most any other card. Modern cards can have thousands of PSA 10 populations, even tens of thousands, and in some instances like the Burger Chew, hundreds of thousands. Some of these EX era grails, including the Gold Stars, have PSA 10 populations under 100. That scarcity changes everything. Unseen Forces, Delta Species, and Dragon Frontiers. Now, this stretch of the EX era might be the most creative Pokemon has ever been. Unseen Forces introduced some of those Evolution Gold Star chases, but then, just when you've seen it all, Pokemon completely changes the game with Delta species. And if you weren't around during this era, these cards were weird. You had Pokemon with completely different typing. At the time, it felt a bit bizarre. Now, collectors absolutely love them because they're so unique. Then, Dragon Frontiers took that concept one step further, and today, Dragon Frontiers is one of the most beloved EX era sets that ever came out. The artwork, the gold stars, the Delta species Pokemon, these sets had everything collectors wanted. So, enough with the gold stars. Let's get to my personal favorite, silver border EXs. Let's get back on track. So, why do I believe that silver border EXs are actually undervalued? Well, it's pretty simple. Gold stars are already considered grails. Everybody already knows how rare and how expensive they are. But a lot of these silver border EX cards still feel underappreciated and cheap. They're rare, they're hard to grade, the PSA 10 pops are low, and the artwork is incredible. Cards like my favorite, Gengar EX, Scyther EX, Mewtwo EX. Let's not forget about Lugia EX, Vaporeon EX, Tyranitar EX. These cards are unbelievably tough and also unbelievably beautiful in PSA 10. Visually, I truly believe they look better than most of the modern arts that we see today. The silver borders just hit and pop a little bit different. The artwork feels raw, it feels aggressive, it almost feels chaotic. Modern cards, they often feel polished. These EX era cards, they feel alive. So, quickly, let's go through why the EX era is moving now. I think there's a few reasons. Number one, nostalgia. Kids who grew up during the EX era now have disposable income to spend on these older, vintage, beautiful cards. Number two, modern fatigue. A lot of collectors are getting burned out by endless releases and huge PSA populations. And three, true scarcity. This is not the artificial scarcity that buzzword is going about so often these days. This was true scarcity. Low print runs, hard pull rates, and condition sensitivity. You combine all three of those factors together and suddenly these cards start feeling very different from that modern product. Some of my personal favorites and picks that I would go with for the long term, I love Gengar EX, Lugia EX, multiple of the Team Rocket Returns cards like Snorlax and Mewtwo, some of the Japanese exclusive EX cards, and I'm always hunting some of those mid-tier gold star cards, and I'm also always a buyer of these if anybody is looking to sell. I especially like looking for cards that still feel a little bit overlooked compared to some of those other modern grails like Rayquaza Gold Star, because we all know what happens when the big collectors finish chasing those top-end cards. They usually move down the ladder looking for that next big mover. And I personally think we're already starting to see a lot of that happen. In summary, I really want to know what you think. What is the most underrated EX era card? What did I miss? Would you rather own a high-end gold star or a huge collection of silver border EX cards? Drop your opinions down in the comment section. I think the EX era silver borders have just started their run. Guys, if you enjoyed the video, like I said, please make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. It would mean the world to me. If you guys like the content, what I think I might do next is rank my favorite EX era sets from top to bottom. I hope to see you all in the next one soon. Please let me know if you guys are into this content. And as always, peace out.